Can I do a quick last minute test with the interpreters for CJ? And then are we able to hear Pablo as well, or is it only one at a time? Okay, perfect. So as long as it's working. Thank you very much. All we needed.
Okay, are we all ready with the interpreter and everything working properly? I will take that as a yes, and if not, please let me know. We do have a quorum pursuant to section 54956 of the California Government Code. A special meeting of the City Council is hereby called for July 21st, 2022 at 6 p.m. And first, let me welcome and introduce our new Assistant City Clerk, Amanda McVeigh. Amanda will be assisting Margaret with us tonight. And Amanda, if you could give a roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
Councilmember Meyer.
Here.
Councilmember. Thank you. Councilmember Rary.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Here.
Mayor Bryant.
Here.
And Mayor, before
Yes.
I had surgery scheduled for tonight before this meeting was, this week. So I cannot go on camera, but I'm here. I have my agenda. I'm in my office, but I just can't be on camera tonight.
Okay, we'll get better and feel better, and hopefully I have confidence that you're there.
Thank you.
Also, just for the general public and for council, I have another committee meeting tonight at 7 o'clock, so I will be needing to leave this meeting by 6:58. And if that meeting ends soon enough, I will be able to come back. But if not, I will be turning it on over to the vice mayor to run the rest of the meeting should it go longer than that time that I'm able to be here. Having said that, at this time, we're going to go to item A, the housing element update, the introduction of and direction to staff regarding the analysis of existing residential zoning capacity within the city, including review of a list of potential sites under consideration for inclusion in the housing element sites inventory for the 2023-2031 sixth cycle housing element update, as well as an evaluation of site inventory and affordability assumption strategies to address the city's regional housing need allocation, known as RHNA. And at this time, Alexis Morris and Jennifer Hagan will present the staff report. Alexis.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I will give Ines Galmici from Kimley & Horn a moment to share her screen. Before we start the meeting, I did want to go over the meeting translation in procedures for our Spanish interpretation. So here's that slide here. So if you bear with me, staff has enabled the language interpretation feature on Zoom. This allows staff to designate a Spanish language interpreter that will use their own audio channel. Attendees can select the audio channel to hear the translated audio into English or Spanish, as well as the option to mute the original audio instead of hearing it in a lower volume with their chosen language. The interpretation icon is located at the bottom of your Zoom panel of your Zoom window. When you click on the interpretation icon, it will give you the option to click off, English, or Spanish. For attendees, there are two options depending on how they join the meeting. Desktop users need to click interpretation, then select language, and then mute original audio to only hear the Spanish translation. Smartphone users need to tap more, then language interpretation, then select language, and then toggle to mute original audio to only hear the Spanish translation. It is important to encourage everyone in attendance to choose a language. For those wishing to hear the presentation in Spanish, please choose Spanish now, and I will pause for a moment.
So if somebody hasn't moved over to that Spanish thing, all they heard was English.
Right, so the instructions are here on the screen in Spanish.
Okay. I see them in Spanish. I just didn't know if you were going to have the interpreter as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish myself, so. Okay, so I think now that we've paused, we can go to the next slide. And then the next slide, thank you. Okay, so tonight we will be discussing possible strategies for selecting opportunity sites for the housing element and asking council for direction on what strategy to use in order to complete our draft housing element. Before I turn the presentation over to Kimberly Horn to give the bulk of the presentation, I wanted to touch on a few topics that frame tonight's discussion, but that we are not necessarily going to discuss in detail. We've addressed some of these in past meetings, but I wanted to make sure the public is aware of these issues and concepts before we get into a more specific discussion tonight. First, I quickly wanted to summarize what the housing element is. The housing element is a required chapter of our general plan that shows how the city plans to meet the housing needs of everyone in the community. The city has received an allocation, or what we'll refer to as RHNA, of 1,522 units at various income levels in the community. The good news about this housing element cycle is that despite our increased RHNA number, which is almost double what it was for the last cycle, if we follow the state's guideline, it is possible for the city to meet the required housing needs right now without rezoning or amending the general plan. That is a position that not many cities in California are currently in, and it is good news about this cycle for the city of Brentwood. However, depending on what strategy the council chooses tonight, some rezoning could be required in the future, and we'll discuss that in more detail later. A housing element is not a state mandate that the city build housing. That is still up to the private market. A certified housing element is also not a guarantee that the city will meet its RHNA allocation. In fact, most cities in California did not meet their lower income allocations in the last cycle. And with the large increase in the RHNA allocations for cities, in many cities in the state, that is likely to continue. Next slide, please. If fewer units are built in the city than are included in our RHNA, at present, the only consequence is that developers may submit applications under a relatively new state law referred to as SB 35. SB 35 allows qualifying development projects with minimum affordable housing guarantees to have an expedited review process, and it limits the city's ability to deny these projects. Brentwood and most cities in the state of California are currently subject to SB 35 based on the last RHNA targets. So far, no SB 35 project has been submitted to the city of Brentwood to date. In comparison, the penalties for not having a compliant housing element are more severe. Cities with non-compliant housing elements may be referred to HCD, to the Attorney General, or may be sued by private parties. Certain state housing funds also require that the city has a housing element approved by HCD. If a court agrees that a housing element does not comply with state law, the court may restrict the city's ability to approve certain projects, or order the city to approve certain projects, and the city would likely be required to pay attorney's fees to the successful plaintiffs. Next slide, please. So no net loss is a new state law that requires that each time a city approves a project, a site listed in the housing element, it must compare the project with both the number of units in the housing element and the projected income level that we used in the housing element. If either the project has fewer units than shown in the housing element, or the units are developed at a different income level, the city must demonstrate that it still has enough properly zoned sites to meet its RHNA at all income levels. If there are not enough properly zoned sites in the inventory, The city must identify and make available additional sites within 180 days, which could in some cases require rezoning. So this is the state's effort to force accountability, more accountability throughout the 8-year housing element cycle than we had in the past. Including some backup sites in our inventory provides flexibility when implementing the housing element and acts like a bank or an insurance policy that could minimize or eliminate the need to rezone additional sites in the future. Including these excess sites in our inventory is not a commitment that obligates the city to produce more affordable housing than our RHNA allocation requires, and it does not limit the development of those sites to just affordable housing. The sites to discuss tonight all rely on existing general plan designations. I should note that we confirmed or double checked and confirmed with HCD that HCD's guidelines do not permit us to count affordable units required through our city's affordable housing ordinance in our projected sites inventory, unless they are approved or part of a specific housing development. However, we can count these toward the city's RHNA in our annual reports once a project is approved. So those future approved projects with inclusionary housing units wouldn't also increase the number of backup sites in our inventory. So that's just a background of some of the major issues that underlie the information that's going to be presented tonight. And now I would like to turn the presentation over to Kinley Horn to discuss the specifics of our site strategies. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. So we have here on the screen an agenda for you tonight. We'll be presenting quite a bit of information, starting with the progress to date. So what we've done so far in meetings that we've held, discussing the housing element update so far. We'll give just a quick overview on RHNA, the RHNA numbers and the candidate site summary, how we come up with these sites. We'll go through addressing RHNA, some of the initial strategies that we can use, and then we will dive into our 3 strategies that we've identified and that we're asking for your feedback and recommendation on tonight. And we'll also show a map of the sites, provide a summary, and then go into next steps and how the schedule will look moving forward. So we have 3 objectives for our meeting tonight. The first is to present you with the initial framework for the site's inventory, including HCD accepted assumptions and principles that may be used to develop the inventory. Next, we'll introduce the analysis of existing residential zoning capacity within the city, including the preliminary sites list from which the sites inventory will be compiled, and an evaluation of the number of units for which additional sites may be needed to address the city's RHNA, utilizing the 3 different strategies that include varying affordability assumptions and ADU projected assumptions. And then ultimately, we're asking to receive direction from the City Council on which sites inventory strategy to move forward with when preparing affordability projections and the draft housing elements update. So before we jump in, we wanted to give you a recap on what we've done to this point and the discussions that have led to these 3 strategies. We first introduced the housing element update to the Land Use and Development Committee in March, and then both the Planning Commission and City Council in April. Last month, we held a joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting to provide an update on this process and propose a first site strategy. We're now here before you with new sites options based on the feedback that we received in June. And then in addition, we outreach to the community via flyers, email blasts, water bill notices, and updates to the project websites. We also collected 526 total survey responses from the community regarding housing throughout Brentwood. So now this leads us into the RHNA and the sites strategy. As a reminder, the city was allocated a total of 1,522 total units for this sixth housing cycle. This total was approved by ABAG on December 16th, 2021. And the goal of the housing element is to show that the city is able to accommodate the arena. And it's important to note that this does not mean the city must actually build those units. It must just show that the city has the zoning and the regulations in place that allow for the units to be constructed and let the markets do the rest. So to do this, the city must identify specific sites that could accommodate the housing units. When choosing these sites, we must consider a number of factors, such as whether each site has existing or planned resources and infrastructure. And the candidate site selection also looks at zoning capacity and density assumptions by affordability levels. And in doing so, we must make sure that the assumptions are consistent with the other elements of the Brentwood general plan. Another important factor for us to consider is the potential for the sites to develop less units or at different affordability levels than what we had anticipated. As Alexis had mentioned, this touches on the no net loss law, and we'll talk more about this in a number of slides, but it's important for the city to identify backup sites and create that insurance to avoid what we'll call the no net loss. So now to get into the specifics. The first thing that we've done is to look at what the city can currently account for. Excuse me. We'll start by looking at the existing residentially zoned sites. So sites that are currently vacant and zoned for residential use. We also look at existing specific plans and assess whether there is remaining capacity for units there. And then we also look at projects that have received planning approval or are in what we call the pipeline. And the city is able to account for these units as they'll be built over the next 8 years. And then lastly, HCD has pre-approved a methodology for us to calculate and account for future ADUs. As you see on the table on your screen here, this is the breakdown of those units by affordability. So to project out ADU development, we look at the city's past history over the last few years and average out the total over the next 8 years. And then as you'll see shortly, the 3 strategies we have for you do not consider rezoning due to the housing element schedule and the additional time and CEQA analysis that would require. We had also received feedback in the past meetings to avoid this rezoning strategy. The 3 strategies will show you have established that we have the ability to meet HCD guidelines without rezoning for now. Although, as Alexis had mentioned, 2 of the strategies may likely require rezoning in the future. Shown here on your screen are the pipeline projects and the projected ADU figures. So you see at the top, we've got the RENA, and then moving down, we've got a number of the different strategies that we'll be using. So those pipeline projects and projected ADU production. You'll see that with the projects that have received planning approval alone, we're able to fully accommodate the above moderate income RENA. I'll note that these ADU projections that are shown here are using the HCD approved methodology and are included in strategies 2 and 3, but not strategy 1. With that said, we have here a remaining need in the lower income and moderate income categories, and we are proposing the 3 options to be able to solve this. So here we will have the 3 strategies show up individually on your screen, and we'll go through each of the details one by one. Our first one includes a reduced affordability and increased ADU assumption. This is the strategy that is does not include the HCD supported ADU assumptions. and so therefore wouldn't be HCD supported. However, it does have a reduced affordability assumption. So I'll explain this a bit further in the next slide, but as you see in the third line down, affordability assumption, we are assuming that with on sites with the appropriate density, assuming sites with the appropriate density would be able to develop with 21% lower income units and 6% moderate income. With this strategy, we have a total of 5,075 units, with 684 at very low and low, 263 at moderate, and 4,128 at above moderate. This option has a very low buffer, as you see here, with only 8% for the lower income categories, meaning this gives us less backup sites should development occur differently than what we anticipate. And this strategy is the most likely to trigger a no net loss situation and require future rezoning. Next, we've got our second strategy, which does include a HCD approved methodology for ADUs. This assumption, this has an affordability assumption of 100%. So sites with the appropriate density would be able to allow 100% affordable units, and then 100% moderate income units. The potential units here are lower than in strategy 1 at 4,940, but this strategy has the greatest buffer or insurance of all three strategies. So as you see here, we have 303% in the very low and low category. This strategy would be the least likely to require rezoning over the next 8 years. And then lastly, we've got strategy 3, which also includes the HCD approved ADU methodology, but includes a more conservative affordability assumption than strategy 2, but a little bit more than strategy 1. So sites with the appropriate density would be able to accommodate 30% units affordable to very low income households, and then 10% for moderates, and the remaining being for above moderates. And the next slide will clear that up a bit more for you. And then this strategy has the least amount of potential units at 3,837, with a buffer of 30% and insurance of 30% for the very low and low income RHNA. It has a moderate likelihood of requiring rezoning, but more chance than the second strategy. And we'll have this table up again towards the end of the presentation to refer back to afterwards as well. So this table shows the difference in density and affordability assumptions for the three strategies. For the lower income units, we can only account for units that have a density of at least 30 dwelling units per acre. So you see in the first strategy that we assume 21% of units on sites zoned very high density would be affordable to lower income households. 6% would be affordable to moderates, and 60% would be affordable to above moderate. As the density decreases, the affordability increases. With option 2, we assume that all sites zoned above 30 dwelling units per acre would be affordable to lower income households. And then it's 100% for those between 15 to 25 dwelling units per acre, affordable to moderate income households. And then 100% of sites in low to medium density ranges being affordable to above moderate. And then lastly, with option 3, we assume a mix similar to strategy 1, but with a higher percentage for lower and moderate income assumptions. So having 30% 30% of units affordable to lower income households on sites zoned very high density, 10% for moderate, and then the rest 60% for above moderate. So now to get into the details of each strategy, we've got our first strategy here. And so as you see, you'll see in the next 3 strategies, our pipeline projects, all of those numbers will stay the same throughout. We have a total of 968 units from the pipeline projects. As I mentioned, the projected ADU production for this first strategy is double that of the 2 others, which is not HCD supported, but in this case would allow for 270 potential ADUs over the next 8 years. We're looking at here a breakdown of 426 lower income units in the PA1 zone, 132 moderates, and 1,657 above moderates for that PA1 zone. The total will remain the same, 2,215. And then on vacant residential land, we have 94 for the lower income category, 50 for the moderates, and then 1,478 for above moderate. This gives us our smallest insurance with 8% in the lower income category. So some implications for this strategy, as I mentioned, it's double that of the HCD approved projections. This would require additional programs to be included in the housing element to show that the city is incentivizing and promoting ADU productions to be able to meet those numbers. HCD will look at programs that may include waiving ADU plan check and permit fees, creating pre-approved ADU plans to streamline the application review process and lower costs, promoting ADUs via handouts and/or simplified application forms, or an exploration of additional ADU funds, funding assistance for homeowners. And you see in the table down below, we have the HCD approved numbers versus that are proposed within this strategy. Strategy 1 includes an assumption of 20% affordable units on sites with the minimum default density of 30 dwelling units an acre versus HCD's allowed assumption of 100% affordable. And so as we had gone over, that's 9% for very low, 12% for low, and 6% for moderate. And the implications here are this provides a more conservative estimate. This has a lower buffer, a lower insurance than what is recommended by HCD, therefore having a higher likelihood of a no net loss scenario, which would require future rezoning of sites or modification of affordability assumptions in the future. And as mentioned, the ADU strategy is not likely to be supported by HCD. This takes us into strategy 2. And so here we've got our in a PA1 sites that are, the total will remain the same for PA1 and the vacant residential lands, but we have a different number for the very low and low income. So we've got 2,029 for lower income, 186 for moderates, and then none assumed for above moderates in the PA1 zone. Our vacant residential land has a higher assumption here than in strategy 1, with 446 affordable to lower income, 381 affordable to moderates, and 795 affordable to above moderate incomes. As I had mentioned, this has the greatest insurance for our lower income units. So our assumption here, as we just went over, is 100% affordability for lower income sites, those that are above 30 dwelling units an acre, as well as those for moderate income between 15 to 25 dwelling units an acre. This is the typical assumption of most communities within California. This is the one that would require, that would have less potential for no net loss. This would require additional analysis and justification for sites, but is most consistent with HCD's guidelines. So next, we have strategy 3. This here has higher units than strategy 1 for the PA1 area. Same with the vacant residential land, however, slightly less than in strategy 2. Our buffer here for this option provides 30% for lower income units. And it's similar to strategy 2 with a more conservative affordability assumption based on the density. And the implications here is that it requires more close monitoring throughout the planning period, as it does have increased likelihood of no net loss scenario, more likely than strategy 2 to require future upzoning or modification of the affordability assumptions. And so next we wanted to show you some of the areas that we're looking at for our sites. As you see here on the map, we have identified the PA1 zone, that innovation center. We have the projects in the pipeline in pink, and then the vacant land, vacant residentially zoned land in blue. So as you see, the sites are scattered throughout the city, which is an important factor HCD looks at in terms of equity. And so this is the top portion of the city where the majority of the sites are located. I'll give you a brief moment to have a look here, but this map should have been included within your reports. And then in the lower portion, we have just a few sites towards the western portion of the city. And these are just vacant residentially zoned sites. So now I will go into a little bit more detail on SB 35. Alexis had already touched on this, but this is if there is a shortfall of units built between the planning period, the city will become subject to SB 35. This allows eligible projects to be reviewed ministerially without any CEQA review. It's important to reiterate that the city is currently subject within this 5th cycle planning period. The city is currently subject to SB 35. However, no projects have been submitted to date, and most California jurisdictions are as well subject to SB 35. To have a little bit more explanation as to the importance of our insurance buffer for the units, as you see here, strategy 1 with the 8% is highly likely to run into this scenario, while strategy 2 has quite a bit of room to go. That means we have backup sites that we can use for housing development if other sites either develop less units than what we had assumed or at higher affordabilities than what we had assumed. There are more units to play with than in that strategy 1 or within that strategy 3. And then this is the summary of the strategies once again, just to show you in overall the total number of units proposed within each strategy, as well as that insurance backup buffer. And so this takes us into our next steps. Based on receiving direction from City Council tonight, we have established this updated schedule. We've got our workshop tonight, and with your direction, tonight we'll be able to move forward with finalizing the documents to prepare it for a public review in August. At the same time, we'd be hosting another Planning Commission and City Council joint meeting to discuss the draft and findings there. We anticipate having our first submittal to HCD for their first review in September. They'll come back to us with revisions, we'll make those, and then have a second submittal in February. And if necessary, based on how the process has been going on in Southern California, if we need a third submittal, we have room at the moment for that third submittal in May, with an anticipated letter of substantial compliance following that same month, and the adoption public hearings in May as well. Some important deadlines to keep in mind are the statutory deadline of January 31st, 2023. We do have a 120-day grace period, which takes us to May 31st, 2023. If we receive guidance tonight on which strategy to move forward with, we will be able to have to meet this 120-day grace period of May 31st. And with that, I will pass it over to Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Inez. So staff wanted to conclude tonight's presentation by again thanking everyone who is here with us tonight. We understand that housing is not always an exciting topic, but it is important for us to plan for the city's future. We want to reiterate that the strategies discussed tonight will only help us to illustrate the city has the capacity for the future production of housing, but does not guarantee or require that we will construct that housing within the next 8 years. And it's important to move forward in a timely manner so that we can develop a housing element that is able to be developed or adopted by HCD. As stated by Alexis and Inez tonight, we also wanted to re-emphasize the importance of not simply meeting the minimum requirement in our very low and low income categories, but provide additional units that can provide an increased flexibility and potential insurance to avoid or minimize future rezoning of sites within the city. As all of these units we are discussing tonight are part of our inventory, they currently maintain the general plan designations that already allow for residential development on them. All of the assumptions we have presented tonight include assumptions at the midpoint density, which is consistent with city policy. And staff has heard the council and understands that you may not support including all sites above and beyond what is required. Staff is simply presenting to you tonight the options and are willing to make adjustments as directed by City Council. Staff has reduced the inventory already by removing all sites that can that yield 10 units or less. And as we present further options tonight, we can work with that as well. Staff also wanted to reiterate the strategies and assumptions presented are only a sample of the possibilities, and that if council wishes to explore additional strategy options tonight to address the city's RHNA, we do have an interactive table that will allow City Council to modify the very low, and moderate income affordability assumption levels, that will allow council to modify the assumed mixed use percentages, as well as modify the sites in the inventory that should be included or removed to a number that the City Council feels comfortable with. Next slide. And so with that, staff tonight is recommending that the City Council review, discuss, and receive public comments on the Housing Element Update RHNA site strategy and provide direction to staff on which strategy to move forward with. And with that, staff and Kimley Horn, our consultants, are available for questions as the council would like. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendoza.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And Jennifer, housing is exciting. It's exciting. I have a question. Why are we targeting 30% when the low end of the buffer for the HCD guidelines is 15?
So we are currently, typically HCD does request or recommend between 15 and 30% of a buffer. Staff, as we try to reiterate tonight, is recommending the higher, or we're not recommending, we have presented a strategy that presents the higher level of that recommended option, just to allow, as we try to reiterate, future flexibility. The larger number of backup sites or buffer that we have would just allow for greater flexibility. If a site that is considered mixed use were to be developed with only commercial, then it would allow us, greater flexibility to account for that. Or if a site that is fully residential does not develop at the assumed affordability levels, we would have additional sites to have the flexibility to work with that without having to rezone or modify our assumptions in the future.
Okay. I'm leaning towards the 15% from what I'm hearing what's happening in other cities. If you go in at 30, they're going to want 40, 45. You're never going to go in and get the first number. I mean, it's just negotiating. So just FYI on that. ADU assumptions. So it looks like we use the historical to come up with some assumptions, but there's, on the Part E, determination of adequate sites, it says community need and demand for these types of units of housing. So we could build a narrative, which is true in Brentwood. People do want to build ADUs. That helps us drive that number. And we actually could do things in our city to help that happen. I think I brought it up before, like Alamo, for example, has a kit. Like this is a design that's approved. Here's your siding. So it encourages it in that manner. They also, I think they adjust fees and things like that. So I think that we could up our ADU number if we come in with policies that that would make it easier for residents to do that. So I understand we're using historical, but there's other levers that we could use as well. And can someone send us the deck right now? Because I wanted to reference a number, but like I don't have the deck and I don't remember what page. And so if someone could send the deck, I think that would help us during our discussion also. And then when it comes to the modeling of sites, because I don't think we're going to go through that right now. Like I want to look at the sites and go through each and every single one. That's going to take a lot of hours. But I feel like it's my responsibility to do that for our residents. So where can I get a map or the software or whatever it is to go through all the sites? And I want to tick and tie every single APN. And I want to compare that to our zoning. Like I want a spreadsheet of all of it.
So that information, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Who did I interrupt? I apologize.
No, you're good. You're probably answering my question. Thank you.
I'm sorry. So that information was attached to the packet. So we had the table that lists by APN.
It's in a PDF. I needed an Excel.
Okay. We can provide that. We provided the list with the packet a couple weeks ago.
I sent an email asking for an Excel. So, and I think I originally asked for an Excel in the last meeting.
Yeah, receiving, yeah. So yeah. I did email it about 4 o'clock right after I received your email. So if you did not get it,
I haven't seen that, yeah.
I might have to send it with a file share. It might have been too large to go through.
Okay, awesome.
And just to clarify,
okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have my camera on. So
I know Zoom is the worst. I apologize. I just wanted to clarify when you asked for the deck, you meant the PowerPoint presentation that we're showing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I don't have that, but probably Jennifer can shoot that off to you.
Yeah, I'll have more questions around that. Let's see. Those are the big ones. I need the deck to ask to clarify. I want to read it again before I ask the question to make sure that I read it correct. That's it for right now.
Yeah, and the PowerPoint also repurposes the information that's in that staff report as well. So hopefully between those two things and the Excel that we sent you earlier, that gives you the materials you're looking for.
Yeah, one more question. Sorry, Karen, and I'll be done. So where you're saying we just have to put aside sites, SB 35 says if we don't build them out, developers can come in and exercise SB 35, correct?
Correct. And we're currently under that right now as are most jurisdictions in the state.
Yeah, so
So that's for not meeting our lower income RENA targets.
okay, thank you.
Can I have a follow-up on that? With the SB 35, do they have to stay within the what the general plan designates that piece of land for? Or can they come in with a streamlined project for a higher number?
Well, it's supposed to be consistent with the city's general plan. Oh, Katie, saw Katie pop up.
No, please go ahead.
But these projects can often also be eligible for density bonus requests as well, based on the affordability levels they have to provide to be eligible for SB 35. There's a certain list of criteria, and one of those is a pretty high affordability, which can then bring them into density bonus territory as well, which then, as you know, means waivers and concessions.
And is it SB 35 or SB 330 that it's stipulated that that to get the density bonus, there can't be a general plan amendment?
That I'll defer to Katie or Barb. I'm not sure where that lies in all these myriad of.
Mayor and Council, we do have Barb Coutts with us here tonight. And I was just going to ask Barb if she'd like to weigh in here. That's actually, I believe, in the density bonus law itself that says we cannot require a general plan amendment concomitant with a density bonus application, but I'll let Barb continue.
Yeah, the city can't require any kind of discretionary approval for a density bonus application per se. Is that the question?
Yeah, so if they go over what our density is, they don't have to get a general plan amendment. They just go straight through. See, and I read it the opposite way, that they can't get, if a general plan amendment is needed, that they can't go forward. The other question I have is regarding the land in PA1, the multifamily, very high density residential. So you kept referencing 15 to 25 units for high density. And those units are 15 to 35. And you have them listed in the very high density. How are we moving? I know you said that the midpoint is different in this. So could you explain to me how you're almost at the high density of it, at the high end?
Can we share that slide just so we can all see the numbers that we're using for PA1? Because I don't want to misquote. So what I was referring to wasn't the midpoint, it was the affordability assumptions, yield, and how many units that might yield is different than the unit count that the PA1 EIR estimated because of the different. Yeah.
No, this is a whole different question than what I asked earlier.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And, as I said, everything in the tables that you've shown us, I mean, even in the staff report references sites for 15 to 25 dwelling units an acre are at the moderate level. And above 30 are at the very high density and can be at the lower level. And when you showed the map of all the available sites, every single site in, I thought it had every single site in PA1 as the very high density, or maybe
yeah, so if we can call up that map, that's color coded by whether it's vacant in the pipeline or
just innovation,
in the innovation center.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see the innovation center, and I think I went to the next page that may have had the different different
Affordabilities.
dwelling units, yeah, affordability.
Okay.
So, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Meyer.
Thank you. I just want to get a little more clarification on the ADUs and the allowance for projection on that. And what other impacts would we see if we were to change ordinances or reduce costs or change permitting process, or I just want to get a little more clarification about what will impact what would that look like?
Sure, I'd happy to refer that to Kimley Horn, and maybe Inez, if you could call up that slide where you showed what type of programs might be required. And then Dave or Inez can answer that question based on HCD's previous review of ADU formulas.
I think Inez just realized she's on mute.
Yeah, was there a slide or
Yeah.
was it just in our agenda?
As she's pulling that up,
Yeah, there's a slide.
As she's pulling that up, I can tell you just from a practical standpoint in ADUs, it's a very popular method to provide for affordable housing options in communities. So many communities across the state are interested in doing that. So the kind of rationale is past performance is your best guide. And so that's the methodology that HCD uses. It says, what have you done in the past is a good indication of what will happen in the future. The argument we have across the state is, well, you put in all this new legislation, so you basically opened the door and made that much easier. So what is the kind of the balance from the state's perspective? Well, the state looks at it, if you want to be more aggressive in your ADU assumptions, you should have a counterbalance with your policy programs that are more aggressive. So for example, if you have ADUs that are much higher than your past history, then you had things such as pre-approved plans, processing that's much easier, other incentives or financial assistance, technical assistance, et cetera, that would be part of your policy program to supplement that aggressive nature. What the state is also looking for is, if you have an aggressive program, you should have some fallback to say, well, if we don't perform during the planning period, is there a fallback provision such as rezoning or other ways that we can accommodate that that wasn't accommodated as we assumed in our ADU projections? Inez, you want to go over the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But can I break in with a quick question? Because if we're not being forced to actually do the build, this is all about the allocation. Then I'm not clear on why they could then turn around and force the rezone. If have the ability to do this based on our revised ordinances, et cetera.
Yeah, and so the issue is related back to if you're being aggressive on your assumptions on the ADUs, and those don't happen, then you essentially have you don't have enough sites to accommodate that. So you just have to have a policy fallback. This is why the buffer, or whatever you want to term it, is useful to help you to protect you against that.
Yeah, it's still a little bit doesn't, I mean, not a lot of this makes sense, let's face it. I mean, but looking at again, the allocation versus the allowance versus the projection, and they want to give us a little bit of wiggle room here, but take it away there. And ADUs seem to be such a great way for us to actually allow for some of this to happen. And yet we can't force people to build an ADU in their backyard. We can certainly give them the ability to do it. And we can say that yes, with these things in place, you're allowed to build that. But if we can't force it, it's just like not forcing development in general. That's why I'm not clear about why this would force potentially rezone if people don't do it. We've still given them the ability to do it.
It's just back to that same point that if we project a number that we don't meet, then we're vulnerable to having to allocate those units to other locations in the city to meet our RHNA through that 8-year monitoring process that we're forced to do through no net loss. So yeah. It's the same concept with the other projections. If we say we're going to issue 200 building permits over the next 8 years for ADUs and we don't, then we have to make that up somewhere else throughout the period. That's the same concept.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Can I do a follow-up on that? Based on what you've said, I mean, it doesn't seem like it would, it seems like we'd be really shooting ourselves in the foot if we did that and created all these, you know, extra things that are available to them. Why not just create what they say we can, do the assumptions they say that we can, and then create the program to incentivize people for the ADU by using all of the things that are on there, especially the pre-approved ADU plans.
So we can certainly do a combination of various things, right, to incentivize ADUs, the number we project. You know, these are all policy decisions of the council. Whether or not HCD would be supportive of that is the $64,000 question for all the information we're going to put in our housing element, right? So we can do all of those things. Their methodology just encourages us to use past performance to project.
I understand, but if, let's say that instead of the amount, you know, the 270 units or the 135 that they said that we can have, and that's what we report that we're going to do. If we then, on top of reporting that we're going to only do those 135, does the ones, let's say we produce 270, are those then reported based on the same formula? 30, 30, 30, and 10?
Yeah.
So by making it easier and incentivizing ADU production, it could benefit us in the long run because people will be building those.
Correct. So we do those annual reports. And for ADUs, because they're not often sold on the market, HCD gives us those formulas to assume what they're affordable at when we report them out. Yes.
Okay.
So we would report them using those breakdowns once they're permitted or approved.
And real quick,
Okay.
Lafayette just went through this exercise. They were actually under on very low and low and trying to use their ADUs. They were in about 90 units low. So when they came into the meeting, they were told this by their staff and their consultant. And the suggestion there is the jurisdiction would be required to include a program in the housing element to accommodate that shortfall. So they're doing what you're saying. They're building a program to accommodate that shortfall.
And if I just could, Mr.
Excuse
Mayor, I
me,
didn't mean to
Ms. Muller.
interrupt.
I have to leave for the other meeting. So at this time, I will turn the chair to Vice Mayor Rodriguez. And if possible, I will return. But good luck and thank you, everyone.
If you're going to ABAG, tell them that this all is awful and vote against anything ABAG on the housing element related.
Will do. Thank you.
So through the Vice Mayor, Councilmember Rary, just in answer to your earlier question, the packet that was published for your consideration on July 7th includes an attachment, which is the HCD guidebook in this area. And on page 31 of that guidebook, you'll find more information about how HCD allows us to account for various ADU projections. So that's where it is in the packet, just for your information.
Karen, were you done with the questions, Karen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I had actually a couple of questions as well to staff. I'm looking at the 3 strategies. Now, I know there's one of them that has HDC, no, not HDC, HCD supported and non-supported. Now, the strategy 1 where it says no, they wouldn't support it, what would be the backlash of that if we were to move that forward, strategy 1, without it being supported?
So that's referencing the ADU breakdown as they're not likely to support based on our past performance. So the implications are we could go through multiple rounds of reviews as they comment on that. They'll have the opportunity to give us comments on the whole housing element, but that's one right off the bat that they're likely to comment on, which could delay our schedule and cause us to revisit this whole formula at some point in this process. Again, we're on a tight schedule for getting this to HCD and getting it reviewed by them by the deadline of May 31st. the worst case scenario, which may not happen for one particular policy like ADUs, would be that they wouldn't certify our housing element or accept it because of they don't approve it. But that would be the worst case scenario that, you know, and I don't know that they would do that just for the ADU information, but it's just one more thing for them to comment on and return to us to fix potentially.
Okay.
Can I
Thank-
piggyback on that question real quick? I know that the tight line is tight, but I mean, you've heard what's going on in Southern California, like HCD can't process, so they're actually extending a ton, like I think all of SCAG down south. So I think one of the things we're going to discuss in the ABAG meeting that the mayor's going to is what's going to happen with the timeline up here, because cities are starting to revolt. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, there's 3 iterations. So I don't think, I know the mayor's probably, you know, you see this and you get scared. Sorry, there's no you get scared of it not going through, but that's why there's submission, conversation, resubmission. And my other question on that is, most other cities have a council person at these HCD meetings also there asking questions. So at least the people I've spoken to, can we have a council person, and it doesn't have to be me, it could be anyone, that represents the council at your meetings with HCD?
So just really quick, I wasn't done with my questions, Councilmember Mendoza.
I was piggybacking on the one you said about, you know, what's the consequences? There's a lot going on with the consequences with HCD right now. But they're not doing anything.
Okay.
They don't even have enough staff.
Okay. Also, another question to staff, in regards to the buffer, I guess my understanding this is that if we had any type of situation where, you know, we weren't able to build or something changed in the plans or anything like that, it would prevent hopefully any large rezoning in any certain areas. Am I correct in that?
It would minimize or prevent depending on the size of the buffer.
Okay. So that's real important. I mean, obviously here in Brentwood, we're not really supportive of rezoning areas. So, okay. I think everybody else has some good questions. Councilmember Mendoza, did you want to follow up with that, what you were saying?
Yeah, I don't think, I don't think when we address this, we need to live in fear. It's a government agency like any other government agency. And I think as long as we are doing the best job to come at the 1522 plus 15 to 30%, that's all they can hold us accountable for. They can't hold us accountable for more than that as long as we're meeting our affordable housing, you know, our low and very low. So I guess I'm not as concerned as the fear I hear from other people, because I think we have enough sites. I think we just need to figure out the very low income and low income, and what as a city can we do? We know what our residents want. We know what they don't want. I think our residents are open to having affordable housing, and this is more discussion, but I think they're open to having more affordable housing as long as it meets the zoning. So how can we do that? And let's not live in fear. Let's take control of our own city when we're having these discussions and not be controlled by HCD and the AG.
Okay. I have one more question actually. In regards to the community work and everything else that we've done, I know you guys showed different scenarios of things that we've done to get to this point. What strategy does the city staff think that would be best for what you guys have gotten and the information that you have received from residents and workshops and different things like that? Is there a specific strategy that we're looking at supporting as staff, your guys? Just to hear your input.
I don't think we've tied any of the sample strategies we presented tonight to the feedback we've gotten, say, on the survey or anything like that. It's been basically based on the HCD guidelines. So we haven't necessarily made that connection between the survey and, because those were really broad general questions. And this is really, for want of a better description, in the weeds kind of stuff that we're talking about tonight. It's really specific about the methodology. But, you know, I think what staff would recommend is being mindful of the schedule so we don't miss our statutory deadline, because there are big implications for that. That's that January 1st. You know, we have to have something to HCD this fall, essentially, to meet that January 1st. And then we can be in multiple rounds of review, as Councilmember Mendoza pointed out. And, you know, staff would recommend a bank or an insurance policy of a certain number of units, because based on past performance, again, it's going to be difficult for us to meet those low income numbers in the city of Brentwood. It just is. So it would be good to have additional sites to help give us flexibility over the next 8 years as we administer. What that looks like is all policy decisions of the councils. We've just given you what the HCD requirements are and different possible ways to meet those requirements tonight.
Okay. Okay. Any further questions from council members?
Just one question. So
Go ahead, council.
If you're looking at the three different strategies, why is there a different number across the board? How come we don't end up with the same amount of units, regardless if, I mean, you can move them into different categories, but why don't we end up with the same amount of units between those three?
Sure, I think Jennifer can answer that. It's based on the affordability assumptions, but if we could pull up, because it yields different numbers of units, but if we could pull up that comparison slide again.
Yeah, actually, well, so the strategy 2 and 3 should have the same exact number. The only strategy, so the only one that has a different number is strategy 1, because we're using different ADU assumptions. Overall, we are using the same exact base inventory for our vacant land and for a specific plan, and we are going off of the midpoint density range. So for all of those strategies that go off of that, they will all have the same exact total. The changes,
different category,
yeah, the changes would be in the different categories. The only one that we add additional units is the one where we increase the ADU production, and so that one has doubled the ADU. So I think it has 135 more units than the other two strategies.
So, but the amounts are different between 2 and 3, if I recall. I'm trying to get back to it.
Yeah, so in the agenda or in the memo that we had sent, they are the same. I think there might have been an error on one of the slides tonight, unfortunately, in the PowerPoint presentation, but they were correct on each of the individual presentations. But I can share my screen if you would like.
Well, I think even in her presentation, I thought she said that strategy 3 had the least amount of houses or units.
I apologize, that was indeed a typo. Strategies 2 and 3 are both 4,940 total units.
So, and does that then change the percentage because now you have a higher amount?
That was just a typo, just in the total number. The other percentages and numbers by income category, those were correct. It was just the total that was.
No, this one, is this one it?
So this is from the memo with the updated PA1 designation. So you'll see the total units in 2 and 3 are the same. It's just allocated to the different income levels.
Okay, it was a different one that showed the numbers at the bottom. Is
on the slide.
Different slide, yeah.
Yeah, so I apologize. We will fix that. This is the information. You're absolutely correct. The math totals, right, to this same number other than when we increased the ADU projections.
Yeah.
We'll correct the PowerPoint for your
Yes,
for the
absolutely.
record.
Yeah. So that's your buffer. All right. Well, I guess we go to public comment, I guess, if nobody else, Johnny.
Yeah. Just, any other council members have any other questions before we go to public comment? Nope. Okay. If there's no other questions from the council, I will now open it up to public comment. Margaret?
I have received 0 written public comments on this item. If you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature. I will call your name if provided and unmute you to speak. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. I do have 3 public comments in the queue. Danny Dorman will be first, followed by Rod and Carolina Villasquea.
Great. I got it. Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to have us do the Pledge of Allegiance. It wasn't done in the beginning, and believe me, the irony of that is maybe it's just in my mind, but I'd like to have my clock reset so we can do Pledge of Allegiance.
Council, everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, well, we can do the Pledge of Allegiance, no problem. Everybody's ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which is
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay. Am I still hot? I can't tell.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, boy, there are so many questions I have with respect to what was given. Ms. Rary pointed out a couple, typos again. I promised I would keep my tone and tenor at a minimum. So let me just again add what it is that I have been railing against, and that is water. Okay. I got a correspondence from Mickey, our director of public works, which basically said, hey, we're doing so much about water reclamation, but I'm talking about fresh water. And this is great that it's a guideline. And yes, we're going to build homes. And yes, whatever the number is, whether it's 1,600, whether it's 5,000, whether it's 15,000, the fact that we're not taking water into consideration, and especially since it was mentioned that CEQA isn't even involved in this, although CEQA is supposed to be part of the equation when it comes to water. So the hypocrisy of that aside, these are just stone cold facts. You build 5,000 homes. You use our tier 1 water table of 5,000 gallons. That equates to 25 million gallons of water a month. No reclamation is going to cover that. That's fresh water. And why it's not included specifically in any plan is astounding. Why our council isn't really forcing this home is astounding. Now, I like 4 of you. We don't agree on a lot of things, but I do believe in what it is that you do. I really don't understand why the city doesn't take a closer look and look at water, especially since you're getting ready to have a conference talking about raising the restrictions. So we're going to get punished in the guise of trying to conserve water, yet it's not even considered in the equation of new developments. This has really got to change. Now, I feel sorry for those who are trying to afford homes, and we're doing the best we can. I feel sorry for those who are homeless, and we're doing the best that we can. But those are small groups. Water affects everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you. Rod?
Yes, thank you. As I listen to this, I think the one thing that's confusing to me and possibly to the public, and hopefully we can get a little bit more clarity on it, is we keep hearing that nothing requires us to build anything. And so I get that part. It's just zoning. But then the statement gets made, if we don't meet our quota somehow, then the state can step in with SB 35 and make us do more things. And that's where I get a little bit lost. If we're not talking about actually building affordable units, what is it that we would be non-performing on that the state would be able to invoke SB 35? I thought the whole purpose of the thing was to build more affordable units, and that's something that the city is more than willing to do. But yeah, I don't understand what metric we're trying to meet to prevent the state from stepping in and taking these more draconian measures. And I think it's important. And the insurance thing, what are we insuring against? Like, are we saying that by zoning for more affordable units, there's a better chance that more will get built, because we keep hearing that we don't have to build anything, we just have to zone for it. So I'm really, really confused at this point about what it is that we would not be doing. If it's not building houses, what is it that we would not be doing that would obligate us to that would have the state come in and wrench control away from us? What is it that we're not doing? Because otherwise, why are we having to zone for these insurance units? Why wouldn't we just zone for the minimum? It's really confusing. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolina Villaseca.
Hi, first, welcome. Look forward to working with you. And yeah, so I have actually 4 questions. Number 1, historical data I understand, but we only have 20% left of Brentwood to build out. So why are we relying on historical data to look at the numbers that we need to build when we really should be looking at how much land we have left, and keeping in mind that density is an issue? Because if you are trying to cram 5,000 units, where are you going to put that many units? I mean, I saw the map with the pink and the blue and the green and all the different colors. That seems really high for a city of our size. Where are you going to put all those kids? What's going to happen to police? What's going to happen to fire? I mean, we're not looking at any of that when we're putting these numbers together, and it's really worrisome. The apartment complex opening up in front of Pioneer, those apartments are going for $3,000 a month. So you're going to have families moving in there with kids. I don't know where those kids are going to go to school. Number 2, PA1. I was under the impression that PA1 was more commercial. And all of a sudden we have these huge numbers going in there. I can guarantee you nobody wants to live by 4. We had how many meetings about the wall over the 4 extension on the other side of town? I don't know why we put those units there. Number 3, ADUs. Those are on private land. Those are going to be at the mercy of whatever the landowner decides to charge. So how are we counting that as affordable? If the apartments in Brentwood are going for $3,000 a month and they're apartments, can you imagine what an ADU on a private lot is going to go for? And number 4, do we have any builders interested in actually building these things? Because every meeting that I've sat through, every builder has cried and screamed and yelled about in lieu fees instead of affordable units. I don't know why we're going for the moon with 5,000 units. I just think that's too high based on the reality of what we have going on in our city. So those are my 4 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Cinziana Todor.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my input tonight. First of all, even for a person versed like me with numbers and statistics and assumptions and building, just business scenarios. This is super confusing. And I would really appreciate if the residents will get a straightforward kind of presentation as opposed to, just lawyer talk that doesn't make sense for regular people. I spent quite a bit of time reading over and over and over, and I'm still very confused. One, why are we including PA1 and as part of assumptions? First of all, we and the staff should know this. We do not have any assurance that we can break ground in the next 10, 15 years on PA1. So why are we even including those numbers and not save them for the next cycle, RENA cycle, or whatever this is called? Because again, I'm confused. I think that will be a more safer approach to providing assurance for the state or whomever is requiring us to provide these numbers. We're going to build them eventually. And to Carolina's point, that should be just all commercial, because that's all we need at this point in Brentwood. So those numbers, are they coming from developers? Did they ask us to include them just so they get visibility into this whole plan? I'm very confused, and I would definitely like the PA1 numbers to be removed from all assumptions, all scenarios, and so on. So I encourage the city council to really look into it and request this. Also, how does density work? Because we noticed that with all the state housing laws lately, that the midpoint density is actually being scraped. They don't really care. They start at the top point, not midpoint, in calculating their bonus densities. So how did that work into the numbers? And if we're required to just build 1,522 units, why are we promoting 5,000 units? That's ridiculous in my view. And we only show that we have the capability to build more, and the state will obligate us to build more if we show this. So please consider this in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further comments.
Okay, if there are no other speakers.
There's one more comment, public. Antonio Xavier.
I see it now.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Antonio.
Thank you, council member. Sorry, I just got back from my kid's soccer practice and ran in the doors. I apologize for that late hand. I agree with the other comments. We do not need to overshoot the required residential goals set by the state. Please set a more reasonable goal so that we are not giving away excess housing capacity. The voters of Brentwood have spoken in the past. You saw the reaction with Measure L. We have enough housing. We do not need to keep increasing density. Smart growth, please. Smart growth. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I believe we have no further comments.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I was writing something. There are no other speakers. I will close the public comment. If there are council discussion, okay, now we'll go into council discussion. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll now take a motion on the direction to staff. Do we have more discussion?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Lovita, Councilmember Mendoza.
Okay, so the other thing, I had shared the accepted Yorba Linda. I mean, Yorba Linda is one of the only cities that's had their housing element accepted. And it looks like you guys, so I'm looking at the Excel spreadsheet. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. That's awesome. And it looks like we're straight lining 15 units from 2022 to 2031 on, they were allowed to add incremental growth every single year. So why are we not doing that?
So in the analysis for Yorba Linda, they first of all, every city is different. It's based off of their specific history. The city of Yorba Linda had shown that so far within the last year of their projections, they doubled their the number from the previous year. They have shown that their history has progressively increased each of the last 3 years, more so over time. The city of Brentwood, we have looked, and unfortunately, we have not been able to do so. Even looking at our 2002 numbers, we most likely right now are not on track to have the number that we did last year. So most likely we will have the same or less than we did last year. So we can't show a positive increase in ADU production over a period of time similar to Yorba Linda. So in our specific case, while HCD has allowed it in the past, they look at every city on a case-by-case basis. We have analyzed our numbers, and just based on our past projections, we have not received a huge increase in applications or approvals.
Okay. So this is a case where like the council person sat in the meeting and she advocated for her council. Like, so I think that we really probably should look at that also, as having, one of us in those meetings. Cause she said it was hours of her going back and forth with the HCD rep, and she broke them down. So, and not in a bad way, like she really is wanting to build more ADUs. And that's what I'm saying. We can put together programs that do that, and sitting down and having that conversation. But I think we should actually, we did 20 of them in 2020. Like, why can't we at least start with 20 and then do an incremental percentage growth over year if we come up with a program that we feel will work? So ADU, I think we need to relook at that number. The other thing I'm looking at is, I have asked about the Brentwood specific plan a few times, and now I'm seeing, on this list, the Brentwood specific plan. So I don't know if this is something that we need a workshop for, where we go through each APN and go, how did you get this number? Because so if I'm looking at the list that you just sent, I'm looking at Sunset Road. It is 9.83 acres, 11 to 20 density. Assumed density is 15.5. Like,
do you have a site number by any chance?
Yeah, it's the 181900018, I think.
The map ID number. So this is the same. It's attachment 3 within the agenda packet. Attachment 3 is what she's looking at, and it has a table that has all of our draft inventory. So the first chart is a map ID, and the second is the APN.
So like I'm just looking at all the Brentwood specific plan ones.
Okay. Let me look then.
And I think we need to sit down and go through all of this, right? Like, I just don't remember seeing this kind of density on the Brentwood specific plan. Like, we were just looking at redoing the Brentwood specific plan. So I think I need more details on the zoning for these APNs or these map IDs.
So is this the table you're referring to, Councilmember Mendoza? So we all have the benefit of looking. Okay.
I just have it. It's easier for me in Excel.
Yes. Yeah.
So I just
these,
all of the Brentwood specific plan ones to begin with.
Yeah, so the only ones that are included that are as part of the Brentwood specific plan are properties that are within the COIR. It's a mixed use zone that allows for 11 to 20 units per acre, but requires commercial development with 150 feet of Brentwood Boulevard. So it still utilizes, Brentwood Boulevard as our commercial thoroughfare, but does allow single family residential behind that. So that is the only specific plan sub area within the Brentwood specific plan that was included. And so we have an estimation of 15.5 units would be the mid-range of the allowable density, which is 11 to 20 units.
And I don't see anything for low or moderate, and that's because you're saying they don't accept it?
That's correct, because the maximum density on those sites is 20 units. It wouldn't qualify for our moderate or low density. For the moderate, we were assuming that you have to be able to accomplish 25 dwelling units per acre, and for the high density HCD requires it to have a minimum of 30 dwelling units per acre. So for all of the Brentwood specific plan properties, we would not be able to count affordability on any of those sites. They would all be included in the above moderate category.
Okay, so for example, on map ID 58, it's 9.83 acres, 11 to 20 acres per units per acre. Assumed density is 15.5. How many total units? Do you have total units? Because 152, that's the affordable housing, or no, or that's total units.
That's the total units.
Total units. And there's no affordable.
It's no.
Correct, because the base density needs to be at least 30 units an acre for us to assume affordable.
Okay, I'm super confused because I thought we said anything over 9 acres had to do 13% affordable housing. They could not in lieu out.
It's two different, it's two different things. So for the purposes of projecting units to meet our RHNA, to count them as very low or low for the RHNA purposes, they have to have a base density of 30. Our affordable housing ordinance has its own requirements, and that's what I touched on earlier in the presentation. We're not allowed to project those unless they're approved or projects under construction. So we'll be able to report our affordable housing units that are built as a result of our ordinance annually, but we can't project those. So this affordability is just based on HCD's methodology of what the market might produce at those density levels, aside from our affordable housing ordinance.
So, okay, so if I add up the whole Brentwood specific plan, it's 814 units. And if we have a council that believes in affordable housing when they start building, then that would provide 106 units of affordable housing, correct? And then we could take those 106 and count it. Then my question is, can we adjust our submitted number and reduce the affordable housing from somewhere else because we're bringing it in here?
So the HCD guidelines, we double, triple checked because we want to get some value and some benefit of having increased our affordable housing inclusionary numbers, right? So we double, triple checked. They will not let us project those, but once they are real, meaning they're permitted or they're approved, we can count them in our annual report. And that would allow us to have add additional properties to that bank of properties under under no net loss, but we can't project them at this point unless we know that a project's approved and contains those units.
Okay.
Already.
So here, I guess, and this is where I'm not, and I'm sorry, asking so many questions. If I have Mr. Smith owns land, and we in our RHNA number said he's going to give us 10 affordable housing units. Mr. Smith has 10, but Mr. Martinez, actually, we didn't count his, but he actually gave us 10. Can we then move those 10 units from Mr. Smith to Mr. Martinez?
Well, what we would do is report that in our annual report that's required to be submitted to the state, and that might increase our buffer. So we may not need, I'm sorry, I forget which was the first guy, Mr. Smith? Yeah, the first guy who's actually, let's say the first guy who's actually listed doesn't build those as affordable, but someone who we didn't list, the second guy, builds affordable units instead, that will count. And that will help increase that bank of units that we have. And we won't need to rely on the first guy to build his to meet our RHNA. Does that make sense?
Flexibility of moving those units like a puzzle. Because we're on a hope and a prayer, right? Oh, go ahead.
So, but if Mr. Smith is supposed to have 10 affordable units out of his 100 homes or whatever it is, his 100 units, and he only provides 5 because that's all he was required to build on our affordable housing ordinance, then we actually have to rezone another area to accommodate that, don't we? Or can we use some from our bank to say, we've already made that up?
Yeah, so again, whether we rezone or have to make something up depends on how big that bank is. So if that bank is razor thin, then yes, if we lose a site or it's built at a lower projection, then we may need to rezone something else to accommodate the RHNA or adjust the assumptions on some other properties to move these puzzle pieces around. If our bank is big enough, a difference of 5 units here or 5 units there will not matter because we still have an excess number of units that have capacity. And I think it's important to reiterate that this is using all our existing general plan, zoning, and specific plan designations. This is today not showing anybody's upzoned or downzoned or anything. This is what could be built in the city today at the midpoint of the general plan for any property. All we're doing is allocating affordability assumptions to those different properties based on those densities. So we're not saying we're increasing the number of units that are ever going to be built in Brentwood for this process or reducing them. This is what's in our general plan or the specific plans today. So if you have a bigger bank, then you have a lot more flexibility. If those 5 units don't get built or somebody else builds 20, it requires less shuffling and moving those puzzle pieces around, and it minimizes the potential of rezoning someday.
Yeah, I think after this meeting, I probably need to sit with someone and go over APN by APN on the Brentwood specific plan. Because this is the first I'm seeing of that. And I know we've talked about the Brentwood, but I didn't think there was this much housing on Brentwood Boulevard.
Yeah, so this is in the specific plan at those densities. And again, what we're hoping for tonight is some direction on the methodology, and we can apply it to the city and then come up with a final draft for public review. These individual sites, if you say, if council directs us, you don't want sites in Brentwood Boulevard at all, we can look at that in the specific plan at all. Or if you don't want to include sites that are less than 10 acres, we can right now show you what the impacts would be in that table. But going through site by site is really, we need the methodology first, right? We need to understand what council wants us to do, what the goals you want us to accomplish with these affordability assumptions, the types of sites to include. Then we can draft this whole chapter of the specific of the housing element and get it circulated. The individual sites, they matter, but this first step is for us to understand what your methodology goals are. And so, for example, if we're concerned about the Brentwood Boulevard specific plan residential, these are all the existing densities that are in there. We can call up this table right now and show you what might happen if we just take those out, right? Or if we have too much above moderate in there, you don't want to list all those single family parcels, we can call up that table right now and show you what the impacts would be on our models, right? And so that will give us the guidance that we need to just finalize this analysis.
I guess my question to HCD is, how do I prove what's low and medium? If you're not letting me use my affordable housing, then how do I provide you low and medium? The only thing I can think of would say is, let's take all city-owned sites, partner with like an affordable housing person that wants to honor our zoning and allow them to build affordable housing that respects our zoning for those areas.
Well, HCD would love that. Yeah. But the, again, so there was a question in the public comment about what is our metric? What are we trying to accomplish when we say we don't build housing, but we have to build this much housing? So what we mean is we have to plan for it. We have to accommodate it through our zoning and our general plan, and we have to show HCD we don't have policies and practices in place that inhibit the construction of housing, okay, or prevent it. Then it's up to someone in the market, a nonprofit, a developer, to actually build this housing, right, and go through our approval process and go through CEQA and all the things that they'll need to do that. So whether that's a nonprofit who wants a 100% affordable project or a 50% affordable project, or a developer who just wants market rate, all we're doing with this document is saying these sites could accommodate possibly this type of housing, and using HCD's rules, we're going to count that in our favor, right? Then we have to report annually on this very complex metric of what they actually sold for, try and estimate rents. This reporting is really onerous every year now, more so than it used to be. So if we had someone come in who wanted to build a 100% affordable project and deed restrict it, that's the best case scenario from this perspective. It may not be from that site's perspective or the zoning's perspective or that neighborhood's perspective, right? So we're trying to meet many masters always with all these housing policies.
I'll let Karen and Susanna.
So regarding PA1, and this is more for the residents who have joined us this evening. PA1 has always had housing in there, 2,041 units throughout. Well, actually, the majority of it used to be on the east side with just the transit village on the west side. What's happened, it's just changed during our PA1 workshop or when we've had meetings. The new consultant has moved things from one side to the other to create the Majora Park down there and the Jeffrey Way, the green area on the Jeffrey Way area to accommodate those. So those have always been there. For one of the things that we need to look at is, let's say we did do 100% at the at PA1. We know we're not going to build that, but HCD doesn't care. They said that you can allocate everything to there, even though we know we will only get 13% out of it. Then let's say, because we've allocated 100% and we're only going to get 13%, we can then move the other 87% somewhere else. But if we don't allow ourselves to have enough in reserves as the buffer, then that could down the line cause us to have to rezone a single family low density or upzone a medium density area. So that's the consequences if we go too low. I was just reading that it said that the reason why that we had concerns about the 30% and the 10%, and that's why you came back with these numbers. I thought it was we had a concern with 100% of it going to PA1. That was where our concern was, not the 30% and the 10%, because that just came up in tonight's presentation under strategy 3. Is there a reason why we can't go for strategy 3, maybe go up to 40% and 20%, or 50% and 25% to increase that buffer a little bit?
Yeah, we have created an interactive table, so we can pull that up if you would like, but we can modify any of those numbers in our table, and it'll show you exactly instantly what each of those buffers would be changed to. So we could definitely look at any of those options that you would like.
And we know that, you know, unless we go through and put just 13% at every single one of those parcels, that's the only way that we're going to hit our number. So if we go anything above that, we are going to have room to move that to somewhere that is not already identified in the parcels that we have. So that's an important thing for us to think about, is being able to have open parcels that we can move that on. And we can make up some of the things as well through our ADUs. And somebody made a comment about the ADUs that, you know, we don't know what price that is. That's okay, because HCD has said you can assume X amount of this will be very low, and at or below, is it below moderate? At moderate, below moderate. And so you can assume they're at that, and will allow you to take credit for those ADUs. With that, I think maybe playing around with the chart and seeing what our numbers may change to. I would like to see a little bit more buffer than what's currently in the strategy 3. and if we can increase that buffer some, I think we've got a good thing, because this again is, they've made up the rules there, and we don't have to build them there, but we have to leave enough room to accommodate any changes.
I guess I don't understand why you would want to start your negotiating at the high end. Why don't you want to start at 15, knowing that we're going to have to negotiate with HCD, which might leave us at a 30% third submission? But why would you want to out of the gates come in at 30?
Really
That's something we may consider in moving things around.
Because I do think we're going to end up at the 30. But if we start at 30, what I'm hearing is other cities are now having to go over the 30 in the second and third submission. It's just a negotiation game for them.
Okay, really quick, Councilmember Mendoza, if you have a question, I do have Councilmember Meyer. If you're done,
It was a question to Karen's comment. It wasn't a new question. I was asking her, like, to clarify. Yeah, it was follow up for her.
Oh, okay.
But does that make sense? I mean, I don't want to go into 30. I feel like, I mean, that's just putting it all on the table ASAP. I just don't understand that.
But how many of those other cities have to rezone?
Some of them don't have to rezone a lot, but I mean, it's a negotiation game is what it is. So I don't know anyone who goes in with their highest offer when they're negotiating. Yeah. And that's what I feel like we would do if we went in with 30. I think we should start at the 15, knowing that we're probably going to end up at 30.
Okay. One more last comment. The question regarding our drought. Yes, we understand that there's a drought going on in the city. This has nothing to do with building. Well, it has something to do with building affordable homes. It's just the state has said, here's the amount of numbers that you have to build in the next 8 years. Send us something based on our criteria. And it has nothing to do with, the drought. That has to do with actual building permits and our future growth of the city and what we need to do. So that I can see the concern of why we're looking at all this, saying we're going to build all these homes. Realistically, the state has said that we can't stop building homes. We cannot place a moratorium on the building of homes, even though they passed another thing about water shortages and drought. So they put us into a dilemma. And right now we've got about 6,500 or 6,000 to 6,500 more homes left, or available land out there that could accommodate about 6,500 homes, about 2,000 single family and 4,000 or 4,500 multifamily. So until the state tells us that we can stop building or we can place a moratorium, we can't do anything. They have come down on us hard. And it's difficult. So, that's why Councilmember Mendoza has started the our neighborhood voices and is trying to reverse all of that. That's for another day. So that's all the 2 cents I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Meyer?
Thank you. I would say it was worth more than 2 cents, maybe 75 cents. Yeah, it was good stuff. Thank you. Actually, Councilmember, I think that you did a good job of explaining some of the stuff that the residents were commenting on. I was going to specifically ask for clarification on some things, and I'm going to mention a couple more, but I think you did some good stuff there. So thank you. I think one of the questions that I heard is about the statement that we are required to allocate but not build, but how would SB 35 punish us with that in mind? So if you could clarify that, and then I'll have a few others that I wrote down that I think just need a little bit more, kind of explaining in real terms.
And we are currently in SB 35. So this isn't even,
correct.
So.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if the way we've been explaining this is too jargony or not straightforward.
It's a complicated situation, no doubt about it.
Yeah, we are, struggling with very technical information and trying to convey that in layperson's terms. And I think sometimes we're more successful than others. But so what we are saying in terms of building is that the city does not produce housing. We're not a builder, we're not a developer, and the state has not mandated us to do so. What the housing element is a planning document. Someone will build this housing or not based on private property owner decisions, developer decisions, real estate market decisions. Okay, so we're planning for housing, meeting the state's requirements, but we do not build it. Nevertheless, and I'm not saying any of this makes sense, but this is the law. Okay, so nevertheless, we are responsible for reporting every year on how we're meeting our RHNA allocation or not. If the city, not the city as a builder, but the city lowercase, if any jurisdiction is not meeting its RHNA targets, then the state says you are subject to SB 35 streamlining. Okay, and that's not because we are or aren't building housing as a city. It's just that that much housing is not being produced by the private market or nonprofits in our community. So we've planned for it, but it doesn't show up. Okay, so there is a disconnect. We have no control necessarily over whether people apply to build housing in our city. The city has control over whether they do or don't approve those projects, but if they never apply, they never apply. Okay, so under SB 35, if that housing doesn't show up for whatever reason, then we are subject to streamlining ministerial processes and all this for eligible projects. And I will say it's very hard to have an SB 35 eligible project, which is why we haven't had any to date. They are out there, but it's difficult to meet this narrow criteria, but they could. And we're already under it now because we didn't meet our lower income targets for the last RHNA process. Okay, meaning we didn't meet. Again, we didn't build anything. It's not our job to build it. It just wasn't produced in our community. And that is true for the majority of cities statewide. There's a very small list in the entire state of California of cities that are not subject to SB 35. Very small. Does that answer the question?
I think it did. And I want to be clear here. I'm not at all criticizing staff.
No, I don't think you are.
Okay, good. I can see
I just
there was
wanted
a lot of work that went into
Yeah.
this. I absolutely
No, I just wanted to
recognize that.
apologize. We're very trying to break down very complex subjects. And so
Yeah.
please
Well,
let us know
and-
if we're not achieving that.
Yeah, and I think public comments is the way we find those things out. So in tonight, actually, these comments were especially helpful for us understanding what isn't understandable at this point. So I think, what you've done with all of this, and I'm looking forward to the table. I think that's going to help clarify a lot, and it's going to be a really good, productive exercise for us as well. Should I wait for a second? Katie, do you have something you wanted to say before I move on?
You're so kind, council member. I was just going to piggyback on Ms. Morris and say tonight's exercise is all about planning for those opportunity sites where affordable housing can be developed and where we can project that it might go. SB 35 is all about what units actually get built, not by the city. So tonight's exercise is what the city can do to make those opportunity sites available. SB 35 is about whether or not the private market realizes those opportunities to build housing, and then what that implies for the city's processes. So they're just, they touch on each other, but they are not directly correlated. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think one of the other questions I heard was why rely on historical data for projection when we only have 20% left for our build out, and then not for the infrastructure to support it. Councilmember Rary addressed some of this, but if you could someone could clarify that just a little bit more, that particular part.
Sure. So when we're referencing historical data, that's for the ADUs and specific to the ADUs, because again, we don't know what ADUs are rented for necessarily or what they sell for. And it's difficult to predict how many might be constructed. So we are using past 3-year data and average to project to the future. So that's what we mean by historical. All the other numbers before you tonight are based on existing general plan and zoning designations and projecting what can be built going forward. It's not necessarily using historical data for those numbers.
Okay. And then the last one on this part of it, for PA1, there was a comment about us not even having assurance that that we would break ground in 10 years, and how can we basically include this projection in our planning. So if you could address that too, like the state is not, at least from my understanding, watching to say, that doesn't look like it's going to happen in 10 years. It's out of your RENA allocation report. So if you could clarify that too.
Sure. So in order to have a certified housing element, we have to show that we can meet our RENA obligation of 1,500 and I'm going to get it wrong now because I have so many numbers swinging in my head. To meet our RENA allocation. Okay. So if we don't use the very high density properties in PA1 and we subtract that entire specific plan area, we are not likely to be able to find other sites to meet our RENA without having to propose rezoning right now because of the base densities. And that's another thing we keep talking about the table. So it's probably a good time soon to roll it out. But you'll see if we just took all of PA1 out, we don't have a lot of other very high density residential land in the city that can meet those very low and low affordability assumption requirements of HCDs. So if the council's direction was, let's take out PA1, well, then we're most likely going to have to rezone sites in the city that are much lower densities in order to submit a housing element that meets our RENA.
Okay. And then my last is just a statement about, sharing the concerns about the idea of rezone and the idea of this back and forth negotiating that we're talking about. What are your thoughts on what would happen if they came back and we ended up going over 30? I mean, I'm nervous about the rezone thing. I don't want to put us in a place of that being highly, highly likely. I also don't want to go too far on the other end. So finding that happy medium is, I think, the sweet spot where that table is going to help. But the question about the negotiations back and forth and seeing that cities are being forced, if you will, to go over 30%, that's pretty scary. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And how could we make it so that that doesn't seem as likely?
So I think Barb has a good perspective on the negotiation aspect of it and dealing with her clients. But I just want to reiterate, whatever we show in that bank or that insurance is just reflecting our existing general plan designations. So it's not a promise to do anything with with those numbers, with those excess sites. It is using our existing general plan and just saying those also have capacity if these don't get built. So whether it's 15, 30, 100% affordability assumptions that we show on those excess sites, that's all it is. It's not we'll give you our 1,500 RENA units plus these too. There is some fear that HCD will see those bigger numbers and say, well, aha, if you could really, let's say, accommodate 3,000 units, we want you to do that instead. But that's not how the RENA process works right now. Okay, we have an allocation. So those excess sites are just showing if this doesn't happen, well, then we still have land to accommodate the housing. It's not a promise that those will also be developed with affordable housing. So whether it's 15% or 30, it's the same concept, right? It's just a bank. But Barb, I think, can illuminate what that negotiation process actually looks like and what HCD usually asks for.
So I'm actually representing a city that has no buffer. HCD acknowledges that they can't require a city to have a buffer. The advantage of having a buffer, I think, which Alexis has indicated, is that you won't run out of sites, right? The other advantage in terms of the idea of negotiating with HCD is if you have a substantial buffer, they're likely not to look so closely at every single site. So the negotiations with HCD in my client's experience have not been about the extent of the buffer, although HCD is obviously happy with a bigger buffer. It has to do with whether the capacity for the sites that's been projected is realistic, and also whether the sites are likely to be developed. So in that case, they may start questioning whether a site that's being designated would actually be developed. But they admit that they can't require a city to show a buffer. Brentwood is in the incredibly advantageous position right now of having zoning that entirely accommodates your RENA. We have some clients in Southern California, where they tripled the RENA, even more than they did, for the whole region, even more than they did in the Bay Area. And they're having trouble finding enough sites to upzone, to meet their RENA. So Brentwood is in this like super advantageous position right now in terms of the zoning and the general plan that you already have. You don't need to show all the sites. If you want to have a smaller buffer. But I think if you just use some of the sites that you've already zoned properly to have a somewhat larger buffer, HCD will then be less likely to look quite as closely at each of the sites. That's the advantage to the city of, in terms of negotiating with HCD about, about having a somewhat bigger buffer than you may need. I have not seen them like pushing cities to have bigger and bigger buffers. The issue really is the justification that each site is actually suitable to be developed. That's what they're focused on. And you also have a lot of vacant sites from the map. And that's also a big factor because a number of cities have to do substantial upzoning and, they're almost completely built out. And if you don't have enough vacant sites, you have to demonstrate that each of the sites that's not vacant is likely, you have substantial evidence it'll be developed the next 8 years, which is hard. But Brentwood has a lot of vacant sites. Those are the best ones to designate. I would just say from an HCD standpoint, they'll give the least scrutiny to those. And you have a lot of properly zoned sites. So I would just say that you're like in this great position. You may want to, you could start with a 15%, buffer and then see where you get. But because you have so many vacant sites and because you're already properly zoned, you are like in a super good position. Probably better than any other client I have in terms of negotiating with HCD.
Nice to hear. So what would be your assumption would happen to these cities that are using a very low or non-existent buffer and potentially are going to have not as much space to move around and are going to have to go through
Yeah, I mean, well, so with my one client, with that's proposing no buffer. Actually, I think Kimley Horn's working for them as well. HCD is just looking at every site incredibly, with incredible detail and hassling them about every other site, all their sites. Their sites are also not vacant, which is another difficulty for them. It's a small built out community. So that's kind of the punishment, if you like, for not having more of a buffer and for barely making it.
And what do you think? Will there be action taken against cities like that?
Well, they still don't have, they've tried twice to get an adopted housing element approved by HCD and they've dumped on them both. There are so many cities in the Skag region that don't yet have, HCD approved housing elements. The last I heard, the number may have gone up. There are only 19 of the 197 communities that had HCD approved housing elements. That's, so they're not going to go after 180 or whatever communities. But there's been a nonprofit group, Californians for Home Ownership, that picked out 6 cities to sue. So anyway, so it's a risk. Okay. At some point, somebody may go after them. I just don't know when.
Thank you. Helpful. Thanks.
Is that all your questions, Councilmember Mark? Okay. Councilmember Rary, I think you had your hand up again.
I think I was next.
I think Councilmember Mendoza was first.
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Barbara, I have another question for you. I was on a call with California GIMBY, and on the call was, and they call themselves the Housing Law Enforcers, David Pye from the Deputy Attorney General's Office in the Housing Strike Force Department, and David Zeisser, the Assistant Deputy Director in HCD Housing Accountability Unit.
Mhm.
They got on this call and they said that if we commit to a number, even if it's over the allocated amount. So if the allocated amount for us is 1522 and we commit to the 4,000, they're going to enforce legally at the 4,000. Have you heard anything about that? And this
Well,
is I said it.
they can require you to have the proper zoning for the 4,000, but right now that's all they can do.
So they
So
said that they were going to come in and can start taking over planning departments to try to find people to build. Like they are all in. And it was with California YIMBY, which is an extreme group, but these are two government agency representatives. Have you heard that?
Well, they don't have the legal authority to do that right now. You know, who knows? You know, by the way, YIMBY's suing some of our clients. But you know, I mean, I've heard HCD say the housing element is a contract. That's more what I've heard them say.
Mm-hmm.
But to the extent it's a contract, they can only make you do what you promise to do in your housing element. What does, you know, city do? The city has promised to, you know, zone 4,000 units. It's not necessary for you to, you know, I mean, your 4,000 is way over your arena, so you don't need to take such a high number. But it's helpful to have a number that's somewhat higher than your arena. But right now they don't have that authority. Anyway,
yeah,
I think we've talked with all these people and dealt with them before, David Zisser and David Pye.
Yeah, one guy. So I guess hearing Barbara, I'm even more resolute in not wanting to go over the 15%. And now I feel like that's generous, but you know, I think we should go in the 15%. I think we should look at ADUs doing an incremental increase over year, because we want, you know, we'll put in programs in place to help support ADU construction. I'm also wondering what the appetite is for identifying city-owned sites. And do we want to build affordable housing in Brentwood? Do we want to say, hey, I mean, I don't know, Habitat for Humanity. If you want to build on this site, the zoning is X amount of houses per acre, and we invite you to build affordable housing that matches that zoning. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that.
So we already have 2 parcels on Janeway over on off of Brentwood Boulevard and Sunset that are zoned for affordable housing. They were part of the inventory that was brought to us regarding city-owned and redevelopment agency or successor agency owned.
So they are on the list.
And I think those were residential medium density. They're in the Brentwood Boulevard specific plan.
So is there any way, Jennifer, Alexis, can we identify those 2 sites? Because I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel about it. I mean, I am pro affordable housing. And if we could do anything to partner with anyone, you know, a government agency and a nonprofit that would build affordable housing that our residents are happy with, I think it's something we should explore.
So I am aware of the sites. I believe the 2 sites on Janeway were less than 10 units. They didn't yield up to 10 units. I believe that potentially was one of the reasons why they were left off of the list. And then
and they were medium density, so they didn't fit in your criteria.
Yeah, they would not have been able to be accounted for low density as currently zoned. So we can look into it and have an inventory. We do have an inventory of city-owned sites. So that is something we can look into in the future for including those, but none of them are currently included in this inventory.
How does the rest of the council feel about that? Because my understanding is there's plenty of affordable housing companies that will come and build, and they are partnering with city requirements, right? So if it's our requirements, and we're driving the bus instead of someone coming in and driving the bus, then we set the groundwork for what that affordable housing will look like and feel like, instead of someone else coming in and saying, you're gonna do, 10 times the density in this area.
Yeah.
How does the rest of the council feel about that being one of the takeaways from this meeting, is where staff can come back with the list of affordable housing, city-owned sites, and we can go from there.
Well, we've had the city sites, and it looks like one of the sites is, well, the one on Brentwood or on Walnut, as you mentioned, is there's some plans submitted already.
But that's
one of the sites. There's a site behind
on that one, on the one on Walnut, but it's city owned, so we can decide that that's not a project we want to go forward with. We want to do affordable housing or whatever we want to do on that site, right? Or do we don't have to stick with the submitted project?
Well, there is a railroad track right there, so if that train tracks ever goes active, building housing there could be problematic, but that's for further discussion down the road. So there are, there's the over there behind Windsor Way Park. There's a couple acres there. There's the old police station. There's a lot there that's at Central and Walnut. There's a couple others, but right now we have somebody marketing that.
Katie, did you have something to say? I don't know if we're going off track here on what you guys are looking for tonight. So if you want to help us, I don't know if we're gonna need to refocus or if we're off track or what.
No, we need to refocus.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Yes, I was just going to chime in and say we're really getting kind of far afield from the methodology direction that we're looking for. Thank you.
But isn't that what we're doing right now? Is like, to me, that would be a lever we pull. It's inventory city-owned sites. Are they viable for building affordable housing from a city perspective?
So that is an inquiry that, of course, the council can consider, but really we need you to be sort of looking at a higher level tonight as to the methodology and the allocations that we want to use. So we can come back and revisit some of these sites at a later time if you'd like, but to keep us on schedule towards getting to that certified housing element by the deadline. Tonight, what we have agendized for your discussion is just the methodology allocation.
Well,
so just really,
quick, I have a question for Katie. When we had our last meeting, I actually said we wanted to go through each site. So that's something we asked for in the last meeting for this meeting. So we're kind of doing that.
Right. And we can certainly do that. And that is part of the site selection process. If you wanted to direct staff to include properties, we can look at it. I just want to caution that some of those may require general plan amendments and rezones because of what their underlying zoning is.
Well, and so that's why, if we could,
so that would be fantastic. Yeah, so we could provide that information to council and whether it would require an additional, just what the status of those properties are. Some of them are under negotiation, some are being part of other plans. So we can certainly give you a list for that. But I just want to caution, if they do require a rezone or general plan, that would require additional CEQA, and that puts our schedule very much off target. Yeah, but we can certainly provide that list.
That would be
that, and they're all under 10 acres, which you guys weren't looking at.
But we chose to not include under 10. We could include under 10 if we wanted to. It's just we as a city chose not to include under 10. But HCD allows you to do under 10, right?
Councilman,
yes.
Councilman Ray, do you still have questions? I have a couple of hands up. But.
Yeah, no. What I'd like to do is bring up the chart or the graph and see what numbers we can so that we can adopt something. I'm ready to move on. I mean, I actually would be happy with just going forward with strategy 3 at this point.
Yeah, no, I don't want to do anything over 15% buffer.
So Jennifer, is it time to unveil the spreadsheet we've been alluding to all night? Maybe a drum roll or?
I had a couple of hands up. Can I just check those really quick before we move on? Oh, they put them down. Okay. Never mind. Okay. Sorry about that.
So
There it is.
so what we have prepared tonight is basically an interactive strategy table. What we're able to do, this is the table right now that currently has all existing sites. It does not include any low or very low affordability or any moderate, and it includes all of the sites in the inventory. So that would be what's shown here. We have the ability, if you want to change it to 30% very low and 10%, these are just examples. It can populate for you and tell you what the buffers are. In addition, we also have the site inventory. Site by site. So if there's any sites, if you have direction that you want to eliminate all sites, maybe that yield less than, that are low density, that yield less than 30 units on the site, we can go through and we can reduce these all to 0. And that will also go through and modify the site inventory. So if we reduce low density sites, that would lower our above mod income buffer. But as we had indicated before, really the buffer that we're most concerned about is the low and very low buffer. We want to make sure we have an adequate buffer there, as well as the moderate buffer. And then the above moderate income sites we can reduce as necessary.
So I know you've got the combined amount for the very low and the low, and what is the breakdown that we need for each of those?
HCD actually lets us in our assumptions combine them as far as our analysis. So ultimately, when they get approved, they would have to be deed restricted to one or the other. But as far as our projections, we can lump them together in our projections, if that makes sense.
So can you put the 30 and the 10 back in there?
So 30 and 10 would have a 30% lower income and then a 40% mod buffer.
Now, will that trigger the no, not less implications? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this most likely would not trigger a no net loss till later in the RENA cycle, if at all. We potentially can make other affordability assumptions or modifications at that time, but it's not likely to be to at least mid or late portions of the cycle in kind of our estimations.
And the HCD, would that supporting it, would it impact number 3 if you did that? Because right now we're at yes. Would that impact that to more of a no?
So this is an accepted strategy for HCD, and as Barb had said, HCD can't necessarily require us to have a buffer, but by having a buffer between 15 to 30%, they kind of tend to take a higher level view. So I think this would be acceptable to HCD.
Barbara Kautz's hand is raised.
Okay. I did see that earlier, but then it wasn't there anymore. I'm sorry about that. Hold on.
Oh, I just wanted to say that if you don't claim 100% of 100% lower income for the higher density sites, the ones that allow 30 units an acre, you're giving up a lot of buffer and needing to designate more individual sites. If that makes sense. It's a little bit about, it's a little bit about how the game is played with HCD, where they allow you to claim any site zoned for 30 units an acre that allows 30 units an acre or more as 100% lower income. And that allows you to basically designate fewer lower income sites if you want. Anyway,
Staff
that's all
put
I
up
was going
the
to add.
inventory on that.
Pardon?
Karen, our transit village. If you go to the inventory tab on
Yeah,
that.
no, but there was other places too that had it. So if staff can show us where the inventory is for all of the 30 plus.
I think it's only transit village because multifamily very high density is 15 to 35. But if we're using the midpoint of 25, that's not 30.
Yeah, but they did include it in the Excel or in the PDF of all of the parcels. They did include that the multifamily very high density as low to very.
Yeah, it says low and very low. Yeah.
But can we pull up the inventory of, do we have a map?
See the map right now?
Yeah, see the map.
Okay, so outside of PA1, the only other sites that are considered low or very low, which would have a minimum density of 30 dwelling units per acre, are sites 12, 13, and 14, which are over in the John Muir Parkway area. So that is the absolute only other area in the city.
Right.
Karen, about that. John Muir Parkway, isn't that all, the rest of that all commercial?
Oh, that, no.
That's what I thought.
That needs to be
It's
taken
the
out.
area that is right backed up to the houses, and that was where they wanted to rezone to allow hotels in there, and I fought against that. Because I said people aren't going to want people driving up and down and, behind their homes.
So can we see on a map where those John Muir ones are?
Yeah,
that's
Jennifer.
what we were going to do tonight. I thought we were going to go through the sites, and so do we want to include these or not?
Jennifer, if you want to stop sharing, I have the map on my screen, and those are residential. Let me call that up real quick for you. So 12, 13, and 14, if you can see my cursor. Sure. Is that better?
Yeah, so there's nothing on those. Okay, so that is zoned 20 to 30 homes per acre.
Well, I would say put it the whole 100% on that.
So let me stop sharing so we can see the other. I miss the council chambers right now. Okay. All right, Jennifer, if you want to call up and see what would happen if we.
Just on those, right?
Maybe
Yeah, so-
100% on all of the transit village.
So you may not need to do that. If you do 100% on some of those higher density sites, you may be able to reduce the total number of sites that we're looking at. So we would need, to look at the inventory and
second.
did you do a save as? So we don't.
Okay, so yeah, we would have to play with the mod. Okay, yeah. So this is taking out
that 100% that you entered in cell J.
Yeah.
Does that take into account PA1 at 100% also?
It did, but then I took out PA1 here. So
I didn't mind adding in, well, if we make our numbers, I wouldn't mind adding in the transit village.
I guess I just don't want to submit anything over 15%. Why can't we just finagle the number to be at 15% and then see what they say? I don't understand why we can't do that. Like, why are we giving them everything?
Did you add back in the transit village to see what that would be?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Giving me a negative number. It's just, I don't know why. I don't know why it's giving me a negative number there. It's doing something weird. Okay, I believe this should be. Yeah, this would have 100% of the transit village. Do you want 100% of the transit village, or just 30% of the transit village and only 100% of the John Muir?
Yeah, let's do the 30% of the transit village.
Okay, let me see if I can try to figure this out then. Like, I didn't set it up to change specific sites. I originally set it up to modify whole sections. But this appears to be accurate. So with John Muir at 100%, some of the mod is
higher on the moderate income.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where I'd have to. Sorry. Some of these mods came out of the PA1, so.
You could put 7% on the rest of the PA1 because we know for sure we're getting 7%. Or wait, is it 7% we're getting for mods in for the rest of PA1? Is it 6% or 7%?
Under the inclusionary?
For the inclusionary, yeah.
Yeah, it's,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, put 7% mod for all the rest, or for all of them actually.
Yeah. So it would calculate out if we did that. This table didn't work exactly for changing individual sites, but yes, we could add the mod back into the PA1 sites. We have to manually do that. And that would account for the minus 36 units that you're down right now. So this is what it would look like if it would be 100% on the St. John parcels. Right now I have it at only at 13% for the PA1, which is which is generally consistent. No, this one is not.
Okay, so we have to do, what is it, 634 extremely low, very low, and low income. And how many are we saying we're going to do?
Well, in this scenario?
In this scenario, yeah, we're doing 826.
Why would we commit that to 826 when we only, with a 15% buffer, have to do 463?
So again, this isn't a commitment, it's just showing capacity, right? So we're not promising.
Saying, but that's not what the AG and the HCD office said. So I have to go by that. And they talked about sending each other emails and snitching on people. So, and it's on YouTube, you can go watch it. I don't know why we would put this on paper and say this is what we can do. Like Barbara said, we don't have to do anything over 0. So 15 is nice, and 15 is a good buffer. And we can easily prove the 15% buffer on all of our requirements. So if they're just saying like, are these feasible? Yes, they are. Then we have sites that can do that for us.
Would this, in this scenario, if we went back down to 15, and obviously took from some places, what would our likelihood for rezone be at this point?
If we went down to 15% affordability for all the sites,
Yeah.
we'd be likely to have to rezone at some point during the cycle.
Why do you,
So-
I don't understand why you would say that, Alexis. If we just changed our affordable housing to 13%, which we can include, so we have our own built-in buffer with our 13% on all new development. And I don't think anyone on this council isn't about pushing affordable housing. So there's going to be affordable housing that we have through our own vehicle that isn't accounted for here, that then you just told me in another conversation made up that number.
True, but the no net loss, if we say that they're going to build 100% of affordable homes and we don't build we only build the 6% of very low, then we have to find another site that can accommodate that very low. And we have to do it within 180 days.
We already have that. We have the spreadsheet. We're just not going to submit it. Why would we give them all of our inventory is what I don't understand. Let's just give them what we have to give them, hold back what we already know we might have to, we don't even know we're going to have to give it up. We don't even know that we're going to have to give it up. I mean, if the initiative passes, we won't have to give nothing up. But why, if it comes to the point where you think there's a net not loss, I'm like, well, you know what? We have site 12 right here on John Muir, and it's 3.39 and it's 84 homes. We already have them identified. Then we just have to serve it up on a silver platter to them when they say, oh, you guys are getting to a net loss. I don't.
Well, then like what they recommended last time, we just give them strictly PA1, and that way we save all of the rest of the units that are out there for making up the differences.
Making up net losses, if we have net losses, right?
Well, we will. I mean, if we declare 100% at PA1, we're going to have net loss because they're only going to come in and build 13%, and 6 of that will be at the lower income. So, you know, we're going to have to find 94% somewhere else.
So there's that portion. Plus, so that's one thing we do, right? We only do submit PA1. Next thing is the ADU calculation. I think we need to relook at that ADU calculation that we're doing. I think we should incrementally add 7% every year, which would take us from 135 to 192. We put programs in place that encourage that. So that adds more units there.
But if you don't within 2 years start making your numbers in the ADU, then you have to come up with something else to add in there. And then again, in a couple of years, if you're not meeting your numbers, you have to come up. So I'd rather use that as a buffer, knowing that we're going to bank those. I want to do all the programs. I think we should do all the programs to encourage that.
Yeah.
But I think we need to use that as our bank.
So we use that as our bank. And then how about reviewing the sites? I mean, if we are about real affordable housing, then let's really review our sites. What sites?
We don't have time for that. We can use those as a bank.
I think that's a quick look is what's already zoned. If it's already zoned and we say that's what we're going to do and that's the program we're going to put in place, I don't think that's a lot to just look at an inventory site and add it to your packet. We've identified these for potential affordable housing, 100% affordable housing developments. It would, you know, render this many units, but I can't vote for anything that's over 15%. I'm telling you right now, there is no reason to do that, except for setting us up for then being on a spreadsheet for 4,000 items, and that's what they're going to look at. They're not going to look at the 1522.
Well, we don't have to include everything. I mean, we can take everything off the plate and only include the numbers, and that way we have other sites to go to.
So for example, then it would be 4. So then 738 for above moderate. What is it? 285 for moderate. So we can just straight line the 15%.
Could we hear from Barbara? Her hand has been raised, and I would love to hear her back on this discussion.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I'm sorry, I actually meant to take meant to take down my hand. I think there's a problem with just showing one site, because one of the other issues with the sites you select is that they don't want all the lower income housing to be focused in one area.
One area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's one issue. But you could pick sites that, you know, result in whatever buffer you want. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'd still like, if we're talking about, if we're quoting you and saying that you think, we're talking about what you said before and about what you thought when it comes to an appropriate buffer or not having a buffer. This discussion is going further, and I just want to hear like what your thoughts are based on how the discussion is developing.
Yeah, I think it's important to show the lower income sites as, I mean, the higher density sites is 100% affordable, because that increases your buffer. The lower income sites need to be scattered around the city. If there's any higher opportunity areas, some of them need to be in higher opportunity areas. In terms of the amount of the buffer, we generally recommend, I mean, I'm just telling you, about a 30% buffer. I mean, that's generally our recommendation to clients.
Oh, what buffer? I'm sorry, I missed that. What was that?
About a 30% buffer, at least. You know, and if they have enough sites, a bigger buffer. But anyway,
Well,
you're in the position where even if you run out of sites and need to make no net loss findings, you have other properly zoned sites that could substitute. The statute says one of the findings you can make is that there's other sites that are properly zoned in the city. So at some point you could, you know, down the line, if the sites start getting developed fast and you run out and you need to make no net loss findings, you're running out of lower income sites, you could substitute some of the sites that are properly zoned, but that you may not have designated.
So, which I understand that, but we only have 2 sites that can accommodate the 30 plus units. And so you said don't put them all into one site, but so we only have 2 sites. So do we take a couple parcels from PA1 and a couple parcels from or 2 parcels from down by John Muir?
So are these all the sites that are zoned at 30 units an acre or more?
Only the 12, 13, and 14, and then 4, 5, 7, 8.
Yeah, so these are all the opportunity
the 9
sites, yeah.
have some have up to 35 units.
Well, any site that allows 30 units an acre or more can be designated as a lower income site.
Okay.
So are those the only sites that allow 30 units an acre or more?
Yep. 3 down.
No, the one that's up there by Amber, 1, 2, 3, those are high density too. Those are 30 units or more.
Yeah.
But they are
Or no, those are
concentrated
15 to 35, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
15 to 35.
We have, I think Alexis is at. Alexis, what were you saying?
I just want to clarify that they are concentrated in the western side of the city, but from the AFFH, the formerly Furthering Fair Housing perspective, these are higher resource areas of the city, most likely.
If we're talking about focusing on inclusionary, which we are, then
right,
for not, selecting one specific,
exactly.
Well, the John Muir, I'd rather not do all that, affordable or all of one other because of the inclusionary focus that we've had.
But we can't do the inclusionary. Well, we do when we're counting it up for as banking things.
Yeah, and I kind of just meant like more of our goal and our vision for it. Not, I see what you're saying. That I'm not talking about like specifically like the 13%. I mean, just the goal of trying to not keep people separated who are lower income is what I'm trying to talk about.
So if we had enough by doing just the transit village or what about, yeah, just the transit village and down by John Muir. The only thing that we weren't meeting was the moderate is what you're saying. And that would then still leave 6, 9, 10, 1, 2, and 3 available if we need, as we know, we're only going to get 13%. So we'll need to reallocate that to a different site. And so we'll still have all of those other areas to reallocate it to.
Jennifer,
So
do you
really-
want to?
We may not even need all of those sites because I think we were way over. So we wouldn't even need to pick all of the transit village and down at John Muir.
So really quick, Councilmember Rary, I don't know, there's a couple of hands up. Barbara, if you could take down your hand if you don't have a question, and also Councilmember Mendoza, unless you have a question.
I have a lot to say.
Oh, okay, you have your hand up then. I just want to make sure to go back to you after Councilmember Rary. So, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so would you like us to call up the spreadsheet again, the blank version, and then take out those or, take out the properties in PA1 that you just mentioned and see what the numbers look like? Okay, I'll stop sharing. And then Jennifer, if you want to call up the original version of the spreadsheet and just delete the, I think it was 6, 9, 10, am I correct?
It was 1, 2, 3. I forget what the other ones were. Here, I think I had it pulled up on my computer.
The way that we have it now is just by the total acreage within PA1 is the way that we ended up with the new PA1. So I mean, I can modify it to only half of each of the acreage or something like that.
No, just to the PA1 TV.
And take out the, 7, 1 and 11.
Okay, so if we just want to take that out altogether?
Yeah. So
Take out 1 and 11.
Okay.
No, keep 7. You took out 7. Keep 7.
7 is the TV.
Yeah, that's the one we want to keep.
Okay.
Yeah. So take out the first and third. There you go.
Hold on. There. Okay.
And then see where that gets us.
Voila.
We're in the net. Oh, and then
no, we haven't done affordability. So what affordability assumptions are we going to be making? If we just say if we do 30,
and then add in down by John Muir, add in 2 of those.
Those are included.
Oh, they're already included?
So what affordability assumption did we want to make? Were we talking about 100% affordability?
Oh, that's right. We were talking about 100% affordability.
Okay. So if we add 100% affordability, then we would have 145% buffer.
So let's take out one of the
On yours?
One from each area, or you can't take it out from the transit village, but you can from John Muir.
Yeah, or I mean, we can cut the transit village in half, or we could take it out of John Muir. Okay, so John Muir is right here. So if we eliminate the largest of those parcels, that would be still 115%.
Let's take out another parcel.
So with only one of the John Muir parcels, we would leave 88% and all of just the TV.
So can we do what you're saying about,
or take some out of the TV to bring it down to a lower percentage?
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of the other assumptions we can make is right now we're making that it's a mixed use development. And we're making the assumption that 80% is developed. We can change that to only 50% for the mixed use, and then it would be a 27% buffer.
That looks good. Now, how do we fix the moderate?
Can we talk
We
about
can-
that assumption real quick? The last that she changed to 50?
Yes.
So talk me through that. I'm a developer. I'm only going to develop 50% of it.
50% commercial.
Yeah, it's a mixed use zone. And so our assumption was that it was going to be a first floor small retail, and then above that would be the residential units. And so the overall mix of a single property would be 20% commercial with 80% residential is what our assumption was. This would be more 50% commercial and 50% residential as a mixed use property.
How can we allow them to downzone that way?
It's allowed per the zone, so it's not down zoning. This is just, again, an assumption we're making. So it's not required. They still have all the same rights. So it wouldn't be modifying any of the rights or allowability within the TV zone. It's just modifying our assumption within our housing element.
Do we think that, so does this bring down the total number of units for that area too?
This would bring down the total units, yes.
Okay, so now I'm like confused because of our meeting the other day. If I can't,
Well,
but no, let me ask. So if I can't down zone, I'm committed to a number. And if I build less than what I committed to, I have to find somewhere else to build those units.
Well, this is a mixed use district. So both are allowed, commercial and residential are allowed in TV. We don't really have that condition anywhere else in town. So it is a mixed use designation.
Okay, so
it's not 100%.
There's 2,215 units. I only, in this whole PA1, I only put in 1,200 units. No one's gonna come after the city for that.
No, because we don't build.
So, but no one, so the state is not gonna come after us and go, you guys said it was 2,215, and now you allowed developers, you approved projects that only delivered 1,200.
We would have to provide our no net loss analysis to show that we have capacity elsewhere in the city for our total arena.
That's kind of my point. So now we're saying 50% here, but ding, 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 now I'm saying I got to build it somewhere else.
Or we don't have to include every parcel. Instead of using this, we only use 50% of the parcels that are in there, and we come up with the same number. So if once those parcels, the ones that are included, get built out and they're at 100% or 80% is what it said. So then, 80% minus our 13%. And we are, so she'll take that and
so if only half of the TV zones are developed, if we only include half of it at 80% capacity, then we would have an 8% buffer.
Change that to 100% capacity, mixed use, what happens?
We're not allowed per HCD guidelines to include 100% capacity on a mixed use zone.
So, and the other thing is that you're only including in your chart or your parcels, you only included 3 parcels for the transit village, which is is based on what had come to us this past week, because you had changed it. And so there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels, not including the one down below. So yeah, I mean, there's 4 parcels there. We don't need to use all 4 parcels.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if city council comes to a direction where you feel comfortable providing with a buffer that you're comfortable with, staff can work with the individual sites in more detail to come up with an inventory that matches that buffer. It is difficult to do it with this inventory spreadsheet the way it's set up. We can add in and assume that maybe instead of these multifamily being low density, they can be mod. And so that would account for the 40% that we have here. So there's other options that we can do that are just difficult, unfortunately, to provide in real time. We've done the best that we can to try to look at the big picture. You know, if it is easier though, just to provide us with direction on what comfortable, you know, level of affordability buffer you prefer, we can go that route as well.
Councilmember Mendoza, would you be okay with direction to go to 15 to 20%?
Yeah, 15 to 20, because if they need to finagle a number, they have that 5%.
Okay, I'd be willing to make a motion.
Okay. I'd be willing to go with that too.
Real quick, could we get clarification? 15 to 20% in all income levels, in the low, the mod, and the above mod, or are we just talking about the low and the mod?
I would say all of them.
I would say all of them. If you, I mean, is that going to be difficult? Because you can remove some parcels.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Barbara said we don't have to submit them all.
yeah, so we don't. That way we have more to work with. If they say, well, you've already gone through all your units, and you now you have to find different ones for each of them because you didn't meet what you reported to us.
Yeah, that won't be difficult at all. And giving us that type of direction, not to make this more complicated than it already is, but PA1 is coming back to council, and you know, some of those designations that we're using might change. So if we have the general guideline of 15%, you know, on those categories, then we can adjust if PA1 adjusts slightly in the coming weeks.
So
I have a quick question, just real quick, Karen. Would any of these trigger the rezoning and things like that, or are we still? Obviously,
we have, like you said, we have plenty of parcels in our back pocket. We're not going to give up. We're holding those back. So if for some reason we're coming up short, we're like, oh look, we have this one. Oh look, we have this one.
Yeah,
so
that's why we said to remove the money, or Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. My concern is just in the future, right? If we have to rezone areas for this in the future, I mean, that's, you know, concerning. Obviously, that's not something we have done here in Brentwood. So, okay, no, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, that's why we had them remove things from the equation so that we had the extra ones. Okay. So I'll move that staff use site inventory strategy number 3 with buffer percentages of 15 to 20% across the board, and that staff move forward with the preparation of the draft housing element update.
I'll second.
I have a first and second. Can I get a roll call?
Katie.
Councilmember Berry, do we want to add anything about looking?
Oh, and to move forward with accessory dwelling unit criteria to incentivize residents towards building accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
And I will agree with that too.
Yeah, and then do we want to talk anything about city owned, like identify any easy to turn, already zoned city parcel lands that might be conducive to affordable housing? If they're easy, not if it's going to be rezoning and general plan.
Yeah, most of the ones that are out there are already zoned commercial, or with the exception, I think, of that one.
I think there's the one by my house too that's residential.
Council members, are we making a motion? I know we're getting back into some discussion.
Yeah, she's making a motion.
She was wondering if I would add that to the motion.
So I think
could look over it and get back to us.
Yeah, because there's residential right here by Bridal Gate that we could use for affordable housing. I don't mind it being near my house.
Katie, I know it's a little bit, so Councilmember Rary, can you restate your motion, I guess, just to be clear for staff?
Does staff
need to? Does Katie get it already?
Well, I'm asking for a little clarification. So what I understand is that you would like us to use 15 to 20% buffer in all income levels and add policies that would incentivize the development of ADU units. My question is this using a 100% affordability assumption for the very low and low units? did you get to that level of detail at this point?
No, we didn't. It would be based on HCD's, whatever the amount that we have. I mean, if they.
On the third tab of that spreadsheet.
Yeah, there was one area where it was, they had to go through something. I'm not sure that I'm there with that, because that is a lot of staff time that's being added on. I mean, we could bring it back for discussion to see what it would take if staff could do that. But I think we should look at the things that were listed in the agenda packet. I think there's 4 items.
All right, so Jennifer, Barb, do either of you need any further clarification as to the motion before a vote is taken?
Let's see,
I was going to share my screen just one more time to make sure I'm okay. So you had mentioned in your original motion strategy 3, which is the 30% affordability assumption with the 10% mod, which currently brings us at 30% and 40%, and then 488%. So your request is to bring all of these at the 30 and the 10 down to between 15 and 20%.
I think don't you think she might have to make modifications to those boxes at the top so that the bottom comes in at 15 to 20%, line 23?
I would modify and remove sites from the inventory, most likely. So that's where it comes to the direction of council, whether you would like me either to remove sites from the inventory to get to the 15 to 20%, or would you like me to reduce the affordability level?
I'd like to remove sites so that we have them available to us later.
Yep. And I still agree with the second on that.
Got it.
All right. Is there anything else? Is there any other clarification needed?
Just one item. So to the extent that you'd like staff to look at the availability of city-owned parcels for potential development partnerships for affordable housing purposes, if it's not necessary to factor that into the methodology for tonight's purposes, is the council comfortable with us coming back with that topic in the course of our review of further housing element update discussions, just so we can get this piece done and be moving forward?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions unless anyone else on staff does. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay, so
we had a first and a second. Can I have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Rary?
Whoops, aye.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez?
Aye.
Motion passes with Mayor Bryant absent.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn. I'm trying to see. Looking at the agenda, it shuts down after that. Yeah, motion to adjourn. Councilmember Meyer.
Question for Jennifer. Jennifer, is there do you you don't have an interactive map, do you, that like has all of these sites easy to look at and plug and play, and you would have
I do not have an interactive map. I can see, I think the public has access to our city's GIS, in which you could type in the APN numbers and find out where they are. I can look into that tomorrow and send you.
No, we do have access to that.
GIS, yeah, I have GIS. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for all your hard work.
Okay, I make a
You all
motion.
for-
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just thank you all for working through this difficult subject with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of hours went into this. We all appreciate it. We do
So I made the motion. Did somebody second me?
I already motioned. I already made the motion to adjourn, and you already.
Okay, and second it. Okay.
I second it. Okay. I mean.
So we need a roll call to adjourn.
You guys want to do a roll call? Okay, a roll call to adjourn.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Rary?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Aye.
Motion passes with Mayor Bryant absent.
Okay, thank you, everyone. See you
See
tonight.
ya.
Bye-bye.